Hello and welcome to WTF, where we help you transform food in your kitchen. I'm Janie, and today I have in the kitchen with me our very good friend, Dave Pietranczyk from Breville Commercial. Hi, Dave.
Howdy. I want to say, and I'm Dave. Thank you for having me, Janie. We've known each other for quite a while.
I was thinking about it this morning, it's been almost 10 years. I met you at NRA. It was almost 10 years ago.
Well, then it's like the anniversary, so we get to do a show together.
I know, so it's super exciting. So Dave has started many, many years ago when it was still polyscience and they were innovating in the sous vide world. They made the smoking gun, and we are super psyched to have him here to share some of their innovations with us and how they can help you make better food, make it better, more consistently, save money, all those important things that you're looking for. So Dave, today we're really focusing on sous vide, and I feel like sous vide has become probably the most mainstream, right, of all the modernist techniques and whatnot. A lot of people are sous videing, and sometimes you're like, okay, I'm just dropping something in a water bath. What's the big deal? Why are we even still talking about it? Can you talk a little bit about, the HydroPro that you guys have made and what makes it different from all the other many sous vide machines out there?
Sure. Anecdotally, my uncle, he calls me Emerald. He's always like, hey Emerald, how would I cook this?
Okay.
And he works, he's as blue collar as it gets, let's just say. And we've reached a point at Sous Vide where he and his buddies at lunch are at the steel mill.
Yeah.
Talking about cooking sous vide, talking about cooking their tri-tip sous vide, and I just think that's pretty cool. 'Cause 10 years ago that was not the case, but so. Having a tool like this, so the circulators that they have are, they probably bought them at Walmart or whatever. They bought the lowest cost immersion circuit they could probably find, which is fine for him. But we have tools that we can do things a little bit better, easier. So, because one of the questions that he asked me, he said, hey Emerald, how do I cook this? How long do I cook this for? Or, how do I do it? And so with that, we developed in HydroPro and HydroPro Plus Sous Vide Toolbox, which calculates your cook times depending on how thick something is, what shape it is, and it goes across a whole wide range of foods. So you could do pork, beef, you could also do custards in here, you can make ice cream, it'll tell you how long to cook it.
Oh, cool.
You could do root vegetables, grains, stuff like that. And so all of that is built into the circulators, and that's something that nobody else has. And we've made it very simple to navigate that.
Yeah. And one of the things that we were just talking about off camera is that you were telling me that instead of just kind of, we think of sous vide as set it and forget it, but now you have ways to actually cook faster and cook more consistently and have more control. Can you talk a little bit about, what makes that possible? Like, what is happening there?
Definitely. So the original method of cooking sous vide, which is like, hey, everybody can do this, is I put it in a water bath set to a certain temperature. Eventually, it's going to reach that temperature. It's not going to overcook.
Yep.
Hooray! Like that's the basic method of cooking sous vide. But if you cook just a little bit hotter than where you want to finish, you can go way faster.
Okay.
And so the last 2 degrees of a sous vide cook is this very long taper. First, the core temperature starts to come up very quickly, and then it'll start to kind of plateau. And so if you look at a graph of the surface and the core, the surface it just goes up and over because it's cold, and then it goes right into a hot water bath. Surface is at temperature immediately almost. The core temperature, it's got the heat's got to penetrate and make its way there. But that last 2 degrees, so let's say, so we're going to cook these pork chops at this low delta one at a temperature of 64 to a core of 62, and basically what we're doing is cutting off that taper. So if I had 62 to 62, it's going to take a very long time. But if I have 64 to 62, I'm going to get there. I'm going to arrive there first.
Right. Okay. So you just mentioned an important term that we're going to be using a lot in this episode, which is delta. So before we dive too far into it, can you explain what delta is?
Yes. So if you've ever grilled a steak on a grill, you've delta cooked. Okay. So you're at your grill surface is at 400, 450, 500 degrees. You only want to hit 135 in the center of your steak. That's delta cooking, cooking higher than where you want to finish.
Okay.
And we're going to do it sous vide in this case.
Okay, perfect. And I don't know if you can see it on camera, but basically we have these massive pork chops. They are so big. So these are, and you guys are so scientific, you measured out. This one is like a, what is it, 50 millimeters? I don't know how many that is in inches. This one's 45. These are gigantic pork chops that you would never be able to cook perfectly in the oven or on your pan or anything,
It'd
right?
be super, super difficult, and you have to have some culinary prowess, and still there's a chance that you're going to get it wrong.
Yeah, so in order to show you what exactly delta cooking is and how it can benefit you, we're going to cook one of these in what is called high delta, and Dave's going to explain what that is, and one of them low delta. So Dave, can you first tell a little bit about what is low delta and what is high delta?
Right, sure. So the difference simply between the two is what's that difference between how far over your desired finish temperature you are. And so for our control, we're going to use 62 to 62, so that's cooking away. And that cook time is actually 4 hours for the steak. It's super long. Cooking at 64 to 62, we're going to run a scenario in Sous Vide Toolbox, and it's going to tell us that cooking at 64 to 62 actually cuts the cook time down from 4 hours and 7 minutes to 2 hours and 2 minutes.
Oh, that's huge.
That's 50%.
Yeah.
And so now we're going to cook at a much higher delta.
Okay.
We're going to cook at 83 Celsius to a core of 52, and then we're going to let it carry over. If I were just to let it cook at 83 to 62 and pull it out, it's going to way overshoot.
Yeah.
So we have to pull it out ahead of time and let it carry over. Now, the thing about doing it this way, there are some benefits to it, and there's a couple of drawbacks, or there's some potential pitfalls to doing it that way. It may or may not reach 62. We've tested this a whole bunch of times. It's going to get in the ballpark. You might be a little bit over, might be a little bit under. We'll see what happens. I don't know. But that's kind of the same thing like if you were on a grill. You might end up a little bit over. You might end up a little bit under. You don't know. Doing it this way will yield a more traditional cook result, but we have way more control in a sous vide bath than we do over a grill. So at the end of this, we're going to sear these. We're going to sear all of these so they're tasty and delicious. It's just that cooking process of the level of control we have.
Okay.
So for the low delta, that's right. We just use Sous Vide Toolbox. We calculate it mathematically. We're not gonna stick it with the temperature probe. We're just gonna let it do. We're just gonna let math happen.
Okay.
But with the high delta, we're gonna take the temperature of it as it cooks. And while this may initially sound foreign when you cook sous vide, you're like, I cook in a bag. How do I poke it? And it's gonna leak or whatever.
Yeah.
But cooking with a temperature probe, again, if you've ever roasted a turkey in your oven and stuck a temperature probe in there, this is not a foreign concept. We're just doing it in a bag.
Yeah, and it's scary because you're breaking the seal.
Yeah. So there's when you were a kid, did you ever take a balloon and you put a piece of Scotch tape on it and you stick a pin in it and the balloon doesn't pop?
No, I'm not. I was not an adventurous kid like that.
Well, when you pull the pin out, they do pop. So spoiler alert, they go boom. But this one won't. So we're gonna do something similar. So this is what's called a closed cell foam tape. And so what this does is it has a food safe adhesive on the back, and we're going to apply it to the outside of the bag. And then we're going to stick the temperature probe through the tape and into the food, and this will maintain the seal so that we can log the core temperature.
So you have to have sometimes they're like, oh, just double back it. So you can't do that with this method. You have to have it vacuum sealed.
Yeah, so no, this one definitely have it vacuum sealed and use the tape. So you basically want like an inch about, I would say. Because even if it does lift a little bit on the corners, there's still a good amount of real estate holding it to the bag. So yeah, it just kind of buys you some protection if you have a little bit bigger piece of tape.
All right. Cool. And I do just want to mention, because I think we didn't mention it, that this probe system is part of the HydroPro Plus. So there's two models, the regular and the Plus, right?
Yes. So there's the base and the Plus model. So you cannot. So the difference is that the Plus has the delta. You can do the delta cooking with the probe, or if you're required to have HAACP logs for compliance, it also does data logging auto-magically, as we call it, and sends the data to the Breville HAACP Manager app, and you can do all these wicked cool things like. When we talk about HAACP with restaurants and stuff, it's pen and paper, and they have to log it. They do temperature checks, they log them and stuff. This does all of that automatically, and then I could airdrop it to you. I could text you those logs. I could do all that stuff, and it's not just like an Excel data file. It's a really beautiful log that has a ton of information. Calibration on the probe has all this great information. So what we've done with that app is light years beyond what anybody else has done. So that functionality. So at the time of recording this is $4.99 for the base model, $5.99 for the Plus.
Okay.
And so if you want that Delta cooking feature or you need that HAACP, it's a steal. Because if the other way to do this would be having an external data meter with a K-type probe. Those data meters cost well over $100 for a decent one to begin with. Plus then to get a decent, even just a decent probe is like another 100, 150. So you're already way higher than the value that HydroPro Plus brings.
All right.
Now you can't, the one thing that's important to know, you cannot make a HydroPro later a HydroPro Plus. You can't simply buy the probe and then it becomes this. It doesn't do that.
It needs the special port.
Yes.
So yeah, for our home viewers, you're like, what's HAACP? Don't worry about it. It's how restaurants are keeping you safe in general in the food industry. But if you are a restaurant guy and you're like, whoa, this is going to save me tons of time, both things are true.
Yep.
All right. So, okay, so we're getting ready. We're going to probe this.
Yes.
Let's go.
Just go and peel this off. Make sure that you don't take the adhesive with it. Boop. That's it. Now just kind of like, just give it a little bit of pressure and just kind of let it do its thing for a minute.
Okay.
With that said, we're just going to go in. Yeah.
Cool.
There we go. So now we're probed.
Cool. All right, so now we're going to drop both of the pork chops into their water baths, let them cook, and then we're going to come back at the very end with both of these finished chops, but then also we had a control, which is just regular, straight old sous vide, and we're going to sear them all, finish them all, taste them all, and tell you how they are different or the same or what happens.
Yep.
We'll be back. All right, it's been a few hours, and we have all 3 chops are done, and we can't wait to see how exactly Delta cooking has affected these pork chops. But first, remember, if you love today's episode, subscribe, like, get notifications, and that way you'll see more of how we do fun things for our kitchen, for your kitchen in the future. All right, now we're gonna have to bring in somebody who's done the hard work of finishing off these pork chops. And here he comes. All right, let's all scooch over. Yay!
All right.
Applause break, applause break.
Welcome, Roman.
Thank you.
All right. So Roman has done the hard work of searing off the chops, but before we cut into them, I want Dave. Dave, tell us how this cooking process went with the 3 different pork chops.
Right, so we have 3 different outcomes. So we have no Delta. So this is cooked at 62 Celsius to a course
Right,
62.
that's kind of what we all
control.
all know and do. Just leave it and forget it. Set it and forget it.
Yep. Then we have a low temperature Delta. So this was cooked at 64 to a course 62.
Okay.
So total cook time on the no Delta was about 4 hours. It was like 4 hours and 10 minutes.
Yeah.
With the low Delta, 64 to 62. This cooked for 2 hours and 10 minutes, I think it was, something like
I
that.
think it was 10 minutes, yep.
So we shaved off, it was 50% of cook time.
Pretty cool.
And then we have the high temperature Delta. This actually reached 62 in 49 minutes.
That's correct.
Wow.
And so we went from 4 hours and change down to 49 minutes.
Yeah.
And
That's pretty incredible.
right?
Yeah.
And in theory, they all look the same on the
all
inside.
look the same.
They'll be, the very core should, in theory, be exactly the same. There'll be some variability, especially in the high temperature Delta, right? You'll see it more replicates the traditional cooking process where you're cooking at a much higher temperature than where you want to finish.
Yep.
So there should be some gradient to it. And then also we've seared the pork chops as well. So
Right.
that's another area where it'll introduce some more heavy cooking to the exterior of the product. But we'll know what we know once we get into them.
All right, so
Let's
this
do
is
it.
what we call the moment of truth. We're going to
All
cut
right.
into each of them, and we're going to see how they look on the inside, and of course, most importantly, how they taste.
All right. Which one should we start with, Dave?
Let's start with the control. We'll start with
Okay.
the no temperature Delta,
All right.
and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, it's a tasty pork chop.
Right? Right. So, it's very uniform in texture, especially with. So you can do the same thing with salmon, and with
Okay.
fish it gets really interesting. The textures that you get are really cool out of fish. But with salmon, this no Delta, it's like eating a stick of butter. Like it's all one temperature. It's a fatty fish.
Yep.
Texturally not necessarily interesting. I'm curious to see what you guys think about the texture of this,
Yeah.
but we'll move to the low Delta.
All right, we're moving to the low delta.
Low Delta.
It's also interesting. Normally, I would never choose a massively thick cut of pork either, because I like my pork like thin. It's pretty much the same to me.
Yeah.
Anybody's getting any differences?
Not really.
Not really. If hard pressed, I might say, if you really thought about it around the outside, it's a little more tougher, but that also could have just been from the searing process.
Right.
Although they were seared the same, I don't know,
I don't really taste it.
much the same.
Okay.
but 2 hours faster. I'm curious to see what you guys think
All
about
right,
Yeah.
this is Delta.
So if you're running a busy restaurant and you want to do a time savings, you know, like this is a huge game changer.
Wow.
So I actually prefer that one.
I was gonna say that's a little juicier, don't you think?
Yes.
It really is.
Yeah, and so so there's also this a saying we use sometimes: cook as long as you need to, but as short as you possibly can.
Right.
And so the texture of this was fine. But this one I think was, like I said,
Yeah,
a little
just had a
bit
little
jus-
bit more juice to it.
Yeah.
Definitely
I
did,
think
for
the
sure.
half degrees is to the better.
Yeah, and then the also a little bit more texturally interesting, where like again, this if you went back, if you go back to that one, or then have that you'll notice that textural contrast.
Yeah,
and
for
it's
sure.
pleasant.
Yes, yes.
I have to agree. I was a little worried that the high delta is going to be all
It would
dry
dry
and
it
gross
out
on the
quicker.
outside, but
Yeah,
it's not.
It's not at all.
It's actually, like you said, it's the
It's
juiciest out of
juicier.
all of them.
Yeah, which I've been sous vide for years, and I'm surprised at that outcome.
Yeah, it's really cool, right?
Yeah,
That's
it's
what I'm here
definitely
for.
awesome.
Yeah. So it's always kind of like magic, right? Like
That's
it's
why
like
he's
Dave
the
is-
talent.
I know. He's the magician, but it's really super cool because we're talking about the HydroPro. We're talking about sous vide as we know and love it, but then kind of taking it to that next level by introducing the ability to cook at different temperatures for time savings.
Textural
for
contrast.
toxin-
There's all sorts of interesting things that it opens you up to do. And so HydroPro is really great. It's got sous vide toolbox in it, and you can cook all those amazing things. It's got ice cream built in there, custards, grains, root vegetables. It's got all kinds of stuff. And then, so HydroPro is a great model. And then we have HydroPro Plus if you want those super time savings. You want to be able to Delta cook and play around with that. We actually see, so it was really designed with HAACP in mind, and as a function of having a probe, you can also Delta cook. It really enabled us to just have that.
Right.
And so the real need that we developed it for was for HAACP. We see a ton of prosumers buying HydroPro Plus because they want the Delta cooking. They don't need HAACP and they don't use that feature.
Yeah.
But they want the Delta cooking. And so a lot of people have it. I know the guys at Sous Vide Association very well. They have them. They love them. A bunch of people within that group have a HydroPro Plus, so it's a great appliance.
Yeah, and after a day of working with it, Roman's already like, all right, now I need to get one too.
Yes, we do. For sure.
All right, so we're going to wrap it up for today. Leave any comments or questions you might have for Dave below. We'll pass them on to him and make sure that he answers them. And until next week from here in the Modernist Pantry Test Kitchen, I'm Janie.
I'm Dave.
And I'm Roman.
You always sit down right here.
Right
Yeah,
here.
because you're going to be, I don't care if you or Dave do the carving.
Yep,
Whoever
he's
wants to do
doing
it. Okay.
He's the talent.
I don't get my hands dirty.
He's the talent.
Thank you, stunt man.
Stunt Sierra, I love it.
I didn't really, I wouldn't have made you do that. I didn't understand. I could see her, pork chop.